Assisted living, is that an option for most seniors?
Well, let me start that question by piggybacking on what Tim just said, and we can have a very structured conversation about what options are, but what an individual wants is something different. And if many of you have family members like I do, leaving that home that you have worked for all these years is very difficult. And I know I've heard this quote at least 100 times over my career. You're going to take me out of this home in a box. I've worked for it and I love it and I want to stay in it, even though the roof is having issues and even though lots of other challenges, transportation and isolation. And so understanding what is the best option is a challenge that this is gonna sound like a repeat phrase from me, requires planning, making sure that you've had discussions, making sure you understand the implications of remaining in the status quo, making sure you understand the isolation that is occurring, whether it's in your own planning or helping a loved one. I had a recent experience with my own mother who is living in a retirement community, and my parents were in a home in a suburb, and as they aged, they stopped driving at night. As they aged, well, they didn't drive when it was raining out. Roads might be slippery. Then they didn't drive, it might be icy. So their world became smaller and smaller and smaller. And so the choices are very important to understand when you choose to stay home. Well, to your question, what about assisted living? And assisted living is an option, and you probably have an assisted living facility within a mile of your home, probably. They've proliferated greatly. But the cost of assisted living, with what you just heard in the income that Tim described, is approximately $41,000 a year. So that is an individual living, think about a couple on that income, that household income that Tim just described, and you see the challenge of having one individual in the home and the other individual in assisted living. And then the challenge of the one in the home getting to the assisted living with all the transportation issues that Kate described. So assisted living is a viable option for those with resources. In the state of Ohio, we have assisted living waiver, and that is the ability for an individual with low income to receive assisted living services through Medicare waiver. That means they're institutional level of care qualified, but they're receiving the care in assisted living. That's a very low-paying rate for a provider. And so it's difficult for providers of long-term care to offer that. As a result, there's a access issue to assisted living for low-income individuals. And likely, if they're living in an affordable housing unit and they end up needing assisted living, it's going to be very difficult to find that. They are more likely going to end up in long-term care. So assisted living for those with resources, very available. Assisted living, even with dementia, much more focused assisted living available now, but assisted living for those with low income, much more challenging.